All right, everyone, we're getting ready to kick things off. Don't worry, there'll be plenty of time for networking after. Feel free to find a seat, grab a drink if you don't have one. Wow, that was very effective. Thanks, guys. Well, hello, everyone. We're so happy you could join us. The goal behind Startup Boston is to create events and content that bring together the whole startup scene across industries, company, departments, and funding stages. So welcome to our event. The topic of the evening will be Building the Future, what founders should know about AI and spatial computing. First and foremost, we want to give a huge thank you to WorkBar for hosting us. I'm going to pass it over to Kara to say a few words.
Thank you. Hello, how's it going?
Good.
Welcome to WorkBar. Has anyone been to a WorkBar yet? Is this your first time? Raise a hand. Oh, wonderful. Yay, welcome. Okay, so we are WorkBar. We do co-working, private offices, meeting rooms. We have 11 locations around the greater Boston area. So we have 2 here in the city, and the rest are all in the suburbs. So depending on where you live, you're probably less than 20 minutes away from a WorkBar. And we also have some large team suites and everything. So if you guys are interested in learning more, I'm here. We have Rosie and Bobby on our team. So feel free to let us know. We'll also put a sign-up sheet if anyone's interested in touring a WorkBar and getting to know our community. We like to do events with Startup Boston as much as we can. It is such a great organization. So welcome. We're really happy to have you. And if anyone needs a bathroom, just as a heads up, it's down this hallway and to the left. So, cool. Welcome.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you so much, Kara. And we're also very excited to be partnering tonight with OrangeLoops for this event. I'm going to let Margarita tell you all about the company.
Hi. Well, thank you for coming. We're really excited to have you today here. We are a digital product agency specialized in web and mobile app development, UX, UI design, QA, DevOps, and of course, AI. We have been working with products like Drill Room and Loop, both mobile apps with AI at the core. If you want to know more about it, you have Gabriel there to ask questions after. We are turning 10 years next year, and since then we have been working with companies here in Massachusetts and New England, like Whoop, GrabHub, and Forrester. And we want to thank Startup Boston for partnering with us in this event, and also WorkBar. Thank you for having us here. We really hope you enjoy the panel. We're looking forward to it, and for you to take something from it and have some fun too. Thank you.
Awesome. So let's get into it. We do have a virtual audience dialing in. So when it does come time for audience questions, we'll be moderating both virtual and in person. But we want to make this conversational. So if you all have questions that are relevant to the topics or questions that are being discussed, feel free, raise your hand. We'll incorporate those. Anything that is slightly off topic, don't worry, we'll save room at the end for some Q&A. So that's all I've got. Without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to our wonderful moderator, Ms. Cara Peterson of Describe AI, to introduce our panelists.
Thank you so much, and thank you, WorkBar, for hosting us. I'm going to come talk to you about office space after this. So, hi, my name is Cara Peterson. I am the co-founder of descrybe.ai. That's with a Y, just to make it confusing. And you know I'm official because I have a clipboard. As was mentioned, I am a startup founder myself. And if you would have told me a year ago that I would be up here talking to you as a seasoned AI startup founder, I would have probably laughed in your face because we hadn't even launched our company at that point. So this is just to show how much things can change in 1 year. So I'm a marketing professional by trade. My co-founder / husband is the development side and the tech side, but things are moving so fast right now that in a year you could be up here moderating the next panel. So that's me, and now I will pass it on to have our panelists introduce themselves. Gabriel, you're up first.
Hi, I'm Gabriel. I'm one of the founders of OrangeLoops. I'm really glad to be here. I'm a little nervous as well. I don't tend to do this, and it's the first time we're doing this ever. Having said that, I've been in the IT industry for the past 20 years. I've been with OrangeLoops for the past 10 years. It's been a wild ride. We're passionate about software development, about product development, and we've been dabbling in AI mobile apps for the past 5 years. We have like this shameless plug, an app called Drill Room that uses AI to track billiard pool games, and we're really proud of it. And it's a beautiful technical challenge. And well, that's it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hey everyone, thank you for braving the heat today to come here. Looks like you're all smarter than me. I wore a suit jacket here. So I'm Vale. I've been with Forrester Research for about 6 years. Came up through the research organization where I covered topics ranging from AI to customer analytics to synthetic data. Spoiler alert, generative AI is something that I also had to talk about a lot in the last couple of years. And then I moved over to a new, more applied role as the Strategic Technology Development Manager at Forrester, maybe the most verbose title in history. But now I get to build AI productivity tools for the company, as well as work with wonderful people like Gabriel. So that's me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here again on a beautiful yet super hot day. My name is Desai. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Novobeing. We are a virtual and mixed reality well-being company that's developing immersive, clinically validated mental well-being therapies that are being used by healthcare systems across the US. So we take gold standard mental well-being therapies, we translate them into fully interactive spatial experiences that you can go about and experience yourself. My journey into this really started, I'm an engineer, graduated from Northeastern University. Anybody from Northeastern here? Awesome, a few folks here in 2010, so it's been a long time. Started the company in the middle of the pandemic, which was not the best decision, to be honest, but also not the worst decision. Yeah, we're 4 years strong now, and raised a little bit over $1 million in funding, and we're continuing to make decent progress in the healthcare and spatial computing space. So happy to be here and answer any questions.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so just want to say a quick few words about what the panel is going to be discussing today. So we have two goals, basically. One is to understand how current companies are utilizing AI and spatial computing today. And then we're also going to think about how to think about using these technologies in your current product roadmap. So before we get into that, into our panel discussion, I was wondering if we could just poll the audience a little bit. How many people here are founders? Awesome, okay, great, welcome. And how many of the founders are using AI or spatial computing right now in your products? Great, awesome, okay, good, that's great. And for those of you who are not currently founders, are any of you in charge or responsible in your roles for these types of technologies in your product lines? Yeah, okay, great. And so the rest of you are just here to learn, right? Awesome. Okay. And how about students? Have we got a lot of students in the room? Yeah. Awesome. Okay, good. Well, welcome. So this is not so surprising that we have a lot of people interested in this space, particularly now. So we also don't want to assume that everybody knows what these two technologies are exactly. Of course, we've all heard AI a million times. Maybe we've heard spatial computing a few less times about what that means. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually define these terms, just so that we're all on a level playing field as we start to have our panel conversation. So we're going to start with talking about spatial computing, and Sid is going to give us a rundown of what that's all about.
Wow, okay. So do we want the simple definition or the complex one?
Let's ask the room.
Do we want a definition that Apple defined, or? So again, this is all my perspective, my take on it. I think all of us as humanity, we're kind of approaching in the next iteration of internet, next iteration of computing, next iteration of interactions. And that's going to be fully realized 3D, virtual yet augmented interfaces that all of us, will be able to interact with in the next few years. So the way I kind of define spatial computing is this intersection of digital information and physical spaces in a way that's absolutely natural and human for all of us to do today. I mean, if you think about the technologies up until now, the only interaction point we had is a touch screen and a 2D interface. Now, we still will have touch, but you won't be touching screens. You'll be touching, basically making these types of gestures, touching interfaces that are fully in a spatial domain, and yet you'll be interacting and interfacing with them. So a simple definition I often tell people is, if anybody here has watched Iron Man and remembers that scene where Iron Man is, Robert Downey Jr. obviously interacting with all these components, right, in his garage, I guess. That future is really not too far for all of us today. Like, that future exists. The only thing you need is obviously an interface to interact with that world. But the way Apple defines spatial is obviously kind of new, and they never use the term virtual and mixed reality. But the fact is, spatial computing is effectively all these technologies, virtual reality, mixed reality, augmented reality, even AI, kind of combined in a way that allows you to interact with content in a fully spatialized 3D way that's not even possible in the 2D world. So that's how I would define spatial computing.
Great, thank you. That's an excellent explanation. So when we talk about AI, when we talk about AI, AI is obviously a pretty big, broad subject. So Gabriel's going to talk to us about the type of AI that we're actually going to be looking into today.
Yeah, the idea was to, given that AI is this umbrella term that's used for many things, to pinpoint what we're going to be talking about, what's the focus of this conversation. So AI has been around for the past 70 years, give or take. In the past 12, 10 years, we've seen the deep learning wave of innovation. Basically, we stack neural networks layers, giving them some depth, and that allowed us to approximate functions, and that allowed us to get some capabilities such as classifying things, predicting, detecting objects. For instance, I have an image. Is there a cat in the image? So we were able to get that over the past 10 years. The recent wave of innovation within AI that we call generative AI gives us the ability to generate cool stuff. And by cool stuff, I mean high quality content. It could be in the form of text, image, audio, video, 3D designs. So the form that it takes, it may vary, but it's so good that it's starting to compete with what humans can create. It's based on the data set that it was trained, the model. So yeah, that'll be the focus of this conversation today.
Great, thank you. Any questions so far? Great. Okay, so now we want to talk a little bit about, so we've got the broader understanding and some of the theoretical stuff laid out. So now we want to talk a little bit about how these these technologies are being used in current products. So the easiest thing to do is to talk about our actual founders here and their companies and how they're using these different tools. So we can go back again to Sid, and maybe you could tell us a little more about how you are using spatial computing in this very interesting use case in your company.
Sure, yeah, happy to kind of elaborate. Maybe I can talk a little bit about the other broader use cases first and then kind of get into healthcare. So the spatial computing obviously is not new. It's been around a while. It's just that it's catching on a lot of attention now because of Apple's headset release. The vast majority of use cases for spatial computing or AR, VR technologies in the consumer landscape is gaming. There's no doubt about it. Gaming is the #1 use case what people buy headsets for in the consumer domain. In the business domain, however, things are a lot different. A lot of companies are using AR, VR headsets for employee training. Walmart's. Oh, check. I think it's working now. Companies like Walmart is actually using it to train employees on how to deal with a situation that potentially could happen inside of Walmart. Maybe there's God forbid, a shooter inside of Walmart. How can employees respond? So there are training scenarios that you can replicate in VR, AR that are not really possible to replicate in real life. There is entire factories that are now simulated in VR. There's a use case where there's a fertilizer factory that replicated its entire operations in VR and now training people on how to operate these complex machineries and stuff in VR so that they don't actually end up, clicking on the wrong thing and creating something wrong in the factory. So training is a #1 use case right now for spatial computing in the B2B space, business to business. Education, believe it or not, there's a company that's teaching math to kids in VR. The company's called Prisms VR. Anybody, if you have kids here and hate math, recommend highly using that app because it kind of, again, turns math learning into an experience that was never possible before without these technologies. In the context of healthcare, we are actually using AR, VR technologies to, again, focus on mental well-being use cases. Our first use case is with MGH Hospital here in Boston, and we're focused on patients who are stuck in healthcare contexts for 25, 30, 35 days with no access to the outside world. They're getting certain treatments that do not allow them to leave the hospital floor. So this is where, again, VR, the use of VR is perfect because you can create an entire simulation of allowing the user to really kind of escape that hospital room and de-stress. And we also develop these therapeutic interventions that help reduce stress and anxiety while they're at it. Another use case is with St. Jude in Memphis, Tennessee, and that one is on the MRI acclimation. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of MRI scans that happen each and every year in the US. A lot of kids go through MRI, but they're scared, and therefore they have to be sedated. And bone sedation is known to be really bad for kids. And if the kids are anxious, they move and they have to repeat the scans. That results in a bad scan. So St. Jude wants to basically replicate the entire MRI experience into a VR experience and get the kids to acclimate to the sights and sounds of an MRI machine before they show up to an actual scan. So these are some of the use cases that we're working on. Again, the focus here is on solving actual business problems and using technology where it's kind of, we see fit. We're not just using these spatial technologies because we think it's cool. We're using spatial technologies because there's an actual hard use case. So, do you have a question there?
Yes, if I may. On the training use cases, where is, maybe a little bit, but what is the actual need of the spatial component, right? Like if you are trained to use a device, traditionally we train people with an actual, like here is a video, this is how you use it. Like where's kind of the added value of saying, well, you have a 3D component that makes you more willing to retain the content.
Yeah. So I think the gentleman's question here is why really leverage 3D and spatial for use cases like training when you can just watch a video? To provide a very simple answer is imagine if you take the next flight, imagine if your pilot actually did not learn how to fly in a simulator, but just watch the 2D video. It's very clear, like these technologies provide you a sense of embodiment that 2D videos cannot ever provide. You are in it, right? Just like a flight simulator. So we can replicate that same experience, but instead of training people how to fly planes, you can teach them how to operate complex machinery or complex MRI machines or anything like that. So,
Thanks.
yeah.
Good question. So I guess a two-part question. First part, how much of what you do is hardware versus software? What's the relationship there? Do you outsource the hardware part or do you do that yourself?
Yeah.
And on the software part, how challenging is to code these applications? What's the challenges there?
Sure. Yeah. So if everybody heard that question, basically, the question was, do we use our own hardware or do we just kind of leverage existing hardware? We do not want to get into hardware. Hardware is really, really hard. There are companies like Apple, Meta, HTC, Lenovo, all these big tech companies that are solving the hardware challenge. We don't want to get into hardware because we're still a startup. And most startups that are thinking of doing something in spatial should not get into hardware unless you really have a niche kind of use case where you require specific hardware. On the software side, it's easy yet difficult. I think just like everything else, because this is such a new interface, you don't just have to think in terms of x-axis and y-axis, you think in terms of z-axis. And so when you're designing interfaces for spatial, you really have to consider how would a user in the physical world interact with an object? Because you can recreate this entire room, for example, in VR and have the user interact with objects as if they're in the real space. So the coding challenges are obviously there, but there's obviously underlying game engines like Unity and Unreal that really have these packages that make it easier for people to code, but then it's getting better by the day.
And how difficult is it to get these apps in these different marketplaces, if you will, to be used by the different hardware that you consider?
Yeah, so Apple has their own app store now. Just like on your phone, you have an app store. On the Vision Pro headset, you have an app store. Meta has an app store as well. In fact, they made over $1 billion and in the last, I think, year or 2 years ago, just on selling apps on the app store. So the app stores exist on the consumer side of things. And on B2B, there's a whole different way to deliver and push apps on the B2B side. I'm happy to talk to you about how to do that.
Yeah, so just to follow up on that, if I can. So if someone here has a great idea for something that they want to do out in virtual reality land, can they access, they can access getting into the hardware pretty straightforward, or is it a complicated process? You just build on top of it?
Yeah, it's basically like building an app for your phones, iPhone or Android. You basically need a device. You can just buy off Best Buy for $200 now. The Quest 2 and Quest 3 is like $500. Vision Pro is just way too expensive. Don't buy it if you're a consumer. If you are a business, right, and if you have a compelling use case, if you're building an entire fertilizer factory and need the Vision Pro, of course you might want to get that because it's got the higher fidelity and higher quality. But yeah, you can buy off-the-shelf hardware, and there's tons and tons of resources that companies like Meta are making available for developers to basically build for Meta, right? Meta's best, they have a vested interest in getting more and more developers to build for their platform because that's how they'll sell more hardware. So they are actually even incentivizing people by giving equity-free grants to build for the Meta platform. Apple hasn't been doing that because Apple doesn't have to do it, but Meta's been doing that quite a bit, and there's tons of resources online.
That's great. Yeah, so that's helpful information. Okay, so any other spatial computing questions before we talk about AI? Is AI already old news? No. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just curious, how does the patent process work for these kinds of technologies? Is there any sort of regulation regarding that, or how can you make your own proprietary?
On the hardware side or software side?
I don't know, on both, I guess.
Okay.
I don't know if this is all very, the spatial computing side of it, I don't know how it's going.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's two. On the hardware side, certainly there's patentability, not on the actual hardware piece because that's already invented, but you can create some additional pieces that can integrate with the hardware, right? So for example, Logitech recently released effectively a pen as an interface for spatial computers. So you can put on a spatial computer and you literally have a pen that's a Logitech digital pen, and you can draw in your physical spaces, right? And that will give you the simulation that as if you're drawing on a real wall, right? So they have a patent for that. So there's innovations that can happen on the hardware side, and on the software side, the patentability is a little bit challenging unless you have an underlying algorithm, right? I don't think you can really patent a user interface today. That won't be granted. But if you have an underlying algorithm, let's say you're mixing multiple signals from the VR headset that record your spatial movement, your eye tracking, and your hand tracking in a way that you synthesize something. A signal basically that can help give you an indication for, let's say, a disease prevention. That's something that you can absolutely patent. And again, happy to chat to you about that.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to talk about AI now. And Jeremy's going to talk to us about how current startups are using AI and generative AI.
Yeah, sure. So I'll caveat this by saying I'm coming really from an enterprise context, but as a market researcher, I can give my sort of general view of the market. And that's really that I think startups should be using generative AI really to mimic the capabilities of much larger enterprises. So if we take like the, marketing content, for example. So that's something that historically would take a really big budget. You need a lot of people, a lot of specialized training in order to do it scale because it's really hard. But nowadays it's a totally different ballgame. We have tools like Writer AI and Copy AI, and really, a very small marketing team or even just one marketer can be pretty dangerous. And of course, now this extends into pretty much any domain of business. We see data scientists who are supercharged by Gen AI. They can learn new skills very quickly. They can code more rapidly. We see graphic designers who are able to rapidly iterate on designs using generative models. Really just about any function you can think of is being augmented in this way. So I tend to think of generative AI as having the potential to be really like a great democratizing technology for startups.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I forgot to say at the top of the call or the top of the meeting, what we do at Describe. And so we're a legal research tool using AI to do exactly that. I never thought about it in that exact same way, but replicating what much larger companies can do using AI, and the summarization capacity is a pretty cool one too to look into if people haven't thought about that. Great, any questions? Okay. So when you're out there in the world and you're thinking about how you could use this, either in your current job or in a startup that you're thinking about, what steps should entrepreneurs in particular take to assess which tools are better for their company? Jeremy, I think we're going right back to you. Oh no, Gabriel, sorry.
The question was?
Oh, just when entrepreneurs are out thinking about which ones of these tools they should consider, how would they start to think about that, and what is a better fit for their product line?
I think on one level, if you're on the generative AI side, if you're managing content, generating content, or handling content, that's a natural fit for using these technologies. Chances are that you'll see some benefit from using them. If your product offers some kind of conversational experience, that's also like a low-hanging fruit to use these technologies. And yeah, that's where you could start. Beyond that, you could evaluate using these technologies for customer service or any number of processes that could benefit in the same way that you were mentioning, to augment your capabilities as a company and be able to, with a smaller staff, fill more processes.
Right, and we're talking about the sort of the positive sides of things, but it's not like it's just that easy to just go do this. Like, oh, okay, I'm going to go build this, virtual reality thing tomorrow. So when we think about the risks maybe of not getting involved, we think about either for established companies or for startups. I'm curious what the panel thinks about sort of the risks of not getting into this space. I'm really interested in what folks might think about that, and that can go to anyone who's interested in taking that one.
Take it.
Thanks.
The risks for not getting into AI are very high. I fundamentally believe that this is the technology for time. It's going to change a lot of things for us. Many departments of companies might potentially become obsolete. This is not to scare anybody here, but really it's happening. I think a marketing team of 10, the job can be done by 2 now, and that's just the fact that these technologies have so much power. But in a way, I think it's a good thing, because it's going to give you the superpowers that you need. So I think as long as you're standing on the right fundamentals for your idea, whether the idea is for your own startup or an idea for a company that you're working for, a department or a team that you're working for, as long as you're standing on strong fundamentals, which is what it really is the problem that you're trying to solve. And why do you need to use these technologies? Start with the problem first, and then put the technology in it to solve that problem. Don't just start with the technology and then figure out what problems you're going to solve with it. The conversation for Spatial is a little bit different, because the technology is still quite not there yet. I think it was 2014 or whatever that when Oculus was launched, the first ever virtual reality headset, people thought spatial computing is here. 2018, when Quest 2 was launched, people thought spatial is here. Apple Vision Pro was launched, people thought spatial computing is here. To be honest, it's not here. It's not here. This is the fact. For certain use cases, yes, it is here. But for the mass market use cases, it's not here. And unless you have a real need and a problem that can only be solved with spatial, that cannot be solved with 2D technologies, then you should consider spatial. Otherwise, do not consider spatial just because it's the hot new thing, right? But AI is different. AI is like, we are a startup company of like 4 people, and we've embedded AI in so many of our processes, and it's even something as simple as meeting summaries, right? Actually, I read the article, I think 2 weeks ago, the founder of Zoom, or CEO of Zoom, mentioned that in the future, people won't have to attend meetings. their AI personas basically will attend meetings on their behalf and summarize everything and assign tasks for people, and that's coming. And Zoom's working on it. So that's the future that we're gonna live in, So I think, of course, that AI is gonna have a much bigger impact, in my opinion, than spatial, but I wouldn't discount spatial just yet.
Yeah, it's funny. We'll hear what Gabriel has to say in a moment, but I was at a meeting, this MTLC Unconference, like on Friday, and it was so funny because there was a breakout on sales and marketing, and they were talking about bots, right? And sort of the AI bots. And so we got into this very weird theoretical conversation about if you have a bot who's trying to sell you something, and then a customer who's also a bot, like that it'll be the war of the bots and who can like convince each other out, and we'll all be on the beach. So anyway, we'll see what happens, but more on AI.
No, I was trying to propose an opposing view in the sense that I think it's good not to lose your head about AI and generative AI, because it's also true that it's changing so fast that like last year, I pretty much wanted my whole graphic design team to drop everything and start using Stable Diffusion. And it was pretty green yet. And it was like a huge waste of time getting them to understand the tools and invading, unpading, and it was early yet. So I do understand that we need to start adopting it first as users, and then rethink all company processes based on what these capabilities gives us. But there's a true risk of jumping too early on the bandwagon and investing on things that are not like a solid foundation yet. So when it comes to AI, one valid strategy is just to wait it out and benefit from sit on the shoulders or stand on the shoulders of giants and let them do the fighting and let them do the big research.
On this topic, I have a question. So what's the thought process behind building your own model versus using an existing model?
I think if there's an existing model that fits your scenario, you should use that. I mean, for me, I create my own models after I exhausted the possibility of using another model, or when the existing model does not fit the bill in terms of performance. I'm trying to run it on a small device on the edge. I have all the models that are out there do not, in terms of performance, fit what I need. So I have to tailor them to my scenario.
Question back.
So my question is regarding using of small language models. Like all of you are using it in the context. They generally want to be using a large model. So are you looking at a trend where everyone is going to go from small language models and more efficient?
I take that one. So the question is about using small language models, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll admit it's not an area I have a ton of expertise, but I would say that it's an area that I think is going to see a lot of attention in the next couple of years. I saw recently Apple put out the open source a small language model, and someone asked it the question, who is Barack Obama? And it said, oh, there's no one famous with that name. So, when you have billions and billions of parameters in these huge language models, a lot of them are useless. But I think we need to figure out what the sort of Goldilocks number is here.
Yeah. Just want to add a funny thing here. I was at the Bevy, whatever water machine that's over there, right? Let's say for whatever reason they decide to integrate AI. They're not going to need an entire large language model, right? I think there's certain very niche use cases that can function with having fewer parameters that do not require the capacity, right, of a larger language model, especially devices that are more on the edge, that don't have a lot of compute power and relies on something that's very, small and battery operated, right? So yeah, in those types of cases, you really are going to need a slice of, the entire model and not really the whole model.
I just want to add, sorry, it's a joke, don't worry. My joke was that I think we should start calling this generative AIoT.
Right. I love it.
Hold on. To your question, small language models, I think they have the promise of being efficient running on the edge, but they're not very good. So they might fit the bill in games, for instance, or you're playing in your mobile device or your PC. So if it mumbles something that's incoherent, it's just an NPC talking, so you don't care that much about that. But the whole world of open source models, that they're not so small. I think it's going to be huge. It's already huge. In many cases, using off-the-shelf GPT models from the large vendors online, it's not an option. Okay, so in those scenarios, you have to start looking at all this world of open source models in their other sizes.
I think there was a question.
Yeah, there was a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned performance a couple of times, and you just mentioned edge. So my question is, how are you measuring performance? And are you using a specific set of tools or tool set to evaluate one versus the other, or do you have a homegrown metric that you're using?
When I refer to performance, is in the context of processing a video stream. So FPS and the number of frames processed per second is the key metric. Beyond that, we do a number of things to measure where are the bottlenecks.
With AI with video, you mean?
Yeah. With models to do object detection and object tracking.
Great. So one of the things I think about is headwinds, right? So things that, you would be facing either as a startup or established company or anything with, thinking about just OpenAI, for example, a lot of people who've built their companies on this are not sure, what could happen. There could be one lawsuit away from their company being done. So what are some of the headwinds, I would say, that founders are facing when looking at, I would say, particularly AI, maybe spatial computing, because it can tell us what that's about. But Gabriel, if you could talk to us a little bit about that, that would be
sure.
awesome.
In my experience, there are many headwinds, many things that can generate that force against you. One is that you have your business scenario has to cope with something that works 90% of the time, 99, 95, 90 something. And in some cases, this just does not, it's not an option. So you have to be comfortable with something that will work most of the time. And the other thing is that you get diminishing returns. It may be fairly easy to get a prototype going that works fairly well, gets you to 85% of accuracy on something. But taking that to 93, it's a whole project. Taking that to 97, it's a PhD thesis, and it's impossible to go beyond that. So you get diminishing returns on your investment. The other is legal, something that typically engineers we tend to overlook, but some clients may not be cool with sharing their data with a backend API managed by OpenAI. So having all those things into account, it's key to make sure that your product and your usage of AI fits your business model.
Right, and for spatial computing, I mean, it's a different sort of issue, but what do you see there in terms of market readiness and things like that?
I think, honestly, the significant headwinds for spatial is the fact that we still need a headset to use it, right? To access the world, you need a headset. And most people do not own a headset. And until these headsets become, the size of our glasses, basically, which is, is happening, right? It's I don't know if anybody saw the demo from I believe it was OpenAI, where you can just wear these glasses and just look at a whiteboard and solve a math equation by having audio assistance. I mean, that's brilliant, right? And so simple use cases like that will allow people to step into the world of spatial without really having to see a digital object being augmented into their space. But I think we're still a few years out from truly portable spatial computing glasses, the size of our actual reading glasses or sunglasses. And when that happens, I think it's going to change a lot of things. But I think the significant headwind right now is the fact that it requires something for you to put on to access that world.
I'm just picturing, I have two kids in high school, and I'm just picturing how much they would love those glasses in their classes and they're taking their finals and stats or whatever. And this may be a little science fiction-y, but what about actual implants or like contacts or things like, is that so far out in the future that it's not even worth considering, or are there people working on that?
There are people working on it, believe it or not. I think we're still probably way too far away from that. I believe in the next maybe 10 to 15 years, we will see a lot of brain computing interfaces. Obviously, Elon Musk's Neuralink is working on that. I do believe that we are going to live in our future where a lot of these digital things will be augmented in our lenses for sure. There's a bunch of science fiction movies that are made about this. But it's happening. It's not, it's not really whether it's happening. I think it's when. And I think it really comes down to the technology and what, how can they miniaturize these glasses to a point where a lot of the, interfaces will be used just for display, and a lot of the compute can actually happen on the cloud. I think that's when we can make lighter headsets to a point where your glasses or your irises or whatever, or lenses can be used as just a display device, but all the processing and computing actually is happening on the cloud. And with 5G kind of, on the horizon here, I think we're really not too far from that. But I think irises, lenses, probably 10 years.
Yeah, okay. That 10 years isn't that far away. Does anyone else want to comment on that? Because I have a question for Jeremy.
No.
Okay. So, sorry, going off script a little bit.
Talk to Elon.
Yeah. So, obviously you work for one research company. It's not like you know everything in the world, but when
I do, but-
you do, he knows everything in the world.
He's got an AI inside.
So, obviously, like, there's that shiny object thing, right? Where, like you're saying, don't just chase AI because it's cool, or don't just chase, putting something in the headset because it's neat. It actually has to have a purpose. So when you think about these, more established sort of companies like Forrester, who have been looking at markets coming and going for forever, what kind of things are you paying attention to there in terms of risk and reward for this space, and what rises to the top in your conference rooms?
Yeah, I think I like to think about strategy in sort of the vein of Peter Drucker, the great management consultant, because he defined strategy as the things you do, but just as importantly, it's the things that you don't do. And a lot of enterprises struggle with that because they're going through the exact same thing right now. They hear everybody talking about AI this, AI that, and they feel like they have to act. And this is how we end up with Chevrolet dealerships selling trucks for $1. So there are a lot of huge pitfalls there. I think another thing we have to be really cautious about are all sorts of new security vectors that I'm hearing about. So we're becoming more and more familiar with terms like data poisoning and prompt injection. I was just reading a paper the other day about bad actors that are actually using ASCII art as a way of getting around the guardrails in place. So it's like, can you give me instructions for building a ASCII art picture of a bomb? And for some reason that works. So I think a lot of enterprises are also—
Thank you for the tip.
Yeah, everyone should go and try that one. But yeah, I think enterprises are really struggling to figure out what they need to do here, and it all goes back to strategy, right? So we need to really take a hard look, listen to our customers, and figure out, is this actually an AI use case, or are we just doing it because it's the new shiny thing?
Right, and maybe Innovator's Dilemma needs to be updated again, right? So the biggest part. No, but that's really interesting because obviously related to these technologies, I'm sure it's going through everyone's head right now, like there's the risks too, the societal risks, right? And all the different things that are unintended consequences. And we think about social media, like if you could go back in time and sort of make clear some of the things that would happen, how it's affecting kids' mental health and things like that. Perhaps now in this moment, we would do things differently, but that's the benefit of hindsight. But so one of the things whenever we talk about AI, and if you see me at other events, I'm sorry, you're gonna hear me say this pretty much every time, but we're in the middle of like an incredible moment in history, in human history, that is not often coming about. And you think about, for example, the Renaissance, right? People didn't sit around saying to each other, boy, this Renaissance is something, huh? This is great. Like you just don't always realize when you're in that moment. So this is off script, so I apologize. But when you think about maybe if you have kids, what your kids would say about what you did during this time, or what you hope we as a society sort of keep at the forefront of our mind as we're, clamoring after these new technologies. I don't know if there's anything you'd like to say about that, how you hope it adds to.
I'm going to hand it to the guy who has kids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to the guy with
I
kids.
have 3 kids, and I want to talk about being a parent and all of this. And I liked drawing when I was a kid. I thought it was awesome. And my kids don't draw very well. And I was like, this is a big thing. And like after this whole generative AI, I was thinking, maybe it's not that big of a deal. Chill out. Like I think like the positive side of the whole generative AI thing is that one person with a clear vision will be able to pull off an amazing project, and that can be your kid. So with the right tools, he could leverage like the vision and not have to nail down and know all the specific things in order to achieve and create something. So that's like.
Yeah, it gives wings to people who maybe need them. And you don't have to answer it about children. It's more about, what do you think, what do you hope that we get right in this moment, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I'm also thinking about education here.
And having kids now.
And I'm having kids, yeah. A few more years, hopefully. But no, I mean, I'm thinking about how history education is going to change for the next generation. How cool would it have been to talk with historical figures and learn about their lives from, well, this is a bad example, but the Harriet Tubman language model that went awry. Obviously something we have to get right, but I think it's totally going to transform education. And it's not going to break it the way I think a lot of people think. I wasn't around when the calculator was invented, but here we are still learning math, still teaching math, and I think it just lets us focus on bigger problems.
Yeah, I think one kind of short comment I want to add is a lot of these new technologies are honestly becoming the new interfaces, right? When was the last time, I mean, I don't want to speak for everybody here, but when was the last time you actually Googled something, right? Because these days, like even Google doesn't list, nobody goes beyond page 1 of Google anyway. And now Google obviously is presenting all its synthesized, generated data right in the front screen for you, right? So there is no incentive for you to go to a website. So for example, if I want to look up a recipe for some Thai curry I want to cook tomorrow, a few years ago, I had to kind of search for Thai curry, vegan, go to these like 6-7 websites, go through like 17 ads. Like this is crap. And now I type in Thai curry recipe, bam, the recipe's right there. So these are, really new ways to interact and interface with information that you need exactly in the right moment, right? And I think where use cases like for Spatial come in is like, I can imagine a world where I can kind of be in my kitchen with a portable headset on, and I can kind of, cook with my friend who is, in California, and we can be cooking the same recipe and thinking we're actually hanging out in the same room, so to speak. So I think these are the use cases that I'm most excited about, and I think these are actual possibilities today.
Yeah, and when I think about what you're doing in healthcare, I mean, there's just so many cool applications. I admit I have a background in public health, so I kind of I'm really intrigued. When you think about, I don't know, people with phobias, think like these things where it's desensitizing people to traumatic, or people with PTSD, maybe returning veterans, or you could just imagine the therapeutic uses of it are pretty astonishing.
Yeah, it's huge, and people are even actually using it for public speaking, which is actually
really that's cool.
There's actually an app that allows you to really simulate a public speaking event and talk to a group of people and get over that fear.
I think we need to make a Startup Boston speaking virtual reality.
We certainly can.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, Stephanie will be standing in the back.
Noted.
Going, hey. No, but that's great. But any other comments on that? I mean, I know it's kind of a big question, but any thoughts? Oh, question in the back.
So I think maybe there's a good way to phrase this, but what are all of your thoughts on blind trust in these models? So you mentioned like making a curry recipe or something, I might say, hey, I don't know how to cook this thing, but I might have a little bit of experience in it. So it might enable me to be able to read through the lines, but for someone who might not know anything, how do they know they're not going to poison themselves?
Right, yeah, boil your curry at 500 degrees for 2 hours. Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one, right? I think at the end of the day, you before AI, you trusted people, right? You kind of trusted that they would provide you with the most accurate information.
Your mic's up. Oh, you're back now.
So,
Oh, sorry, yeah, it's a little bit iffy, but
Yeah,
I'll just
technology always
I'll
works
just speak
before
about
AI.
it. So I think, before these models, obviously, you used to just trust people and their information that they put up online, right? So the hope is that there are enough guardrails that are baked into these models to ensure that, there's verification and validation of information, right? And at least at the end of the day, it also comes down to common sense. Like if somebody tells me to turn the oven on at 500 Fahrenheit, and my oven doesn't go, it goes, the max capacity is 400, and I have to be mindful of that myself. And so I think just because these models are getting more powerful than human intelligence doesn't mean that you should stop using your own kind of sense of, common sense to navigate these worlds.
Jeremy, did you?
Yeah, we'll see if this is working now. I would add too that there are some technical solutions that are emerging here. I don't know who in this room has heard of retrieval augmented generation, but we're getting better and better at being able to key in on a particular resource and say, okay, I got it from this website and it says this is the recipe. So you can actually validate it a little bit more, more so than when you're using ChatGPT and it's just all parametric memory.
And I want to say that we'll talk about models in a loose manner, but these things are evolving to have very complex architectures, and they are evolving to have state machines. There are platforms such as LangChain, ESPY, and part of the goal of these complex architectures is guardrailing certain scenarios. And the whole field of evaluating models and this whole agent, if you will, is an intensive area of research. So.
Great. I know we've been taking questions as we go, but just want to make sure we leave open time for any questions that are even related or unrelated. Oh, we got one in the back.
I just was wondering, I thought the conversation about desensitizing for phobias was really fascinating. Where's the line though for desensitizing in other places? Like, I don't know, I think of gaming and these very violent games that a lot of kids are playing, and making that very real is kind of a scary thought to me, as like the future of how we're handling the desensitization of a lot of
it's funny you say that because we got our kids those, I can't even remember which headset it was, but a couple of years ago, and they play one of those, whatever game it is, where they're shooting each other, and they said, put this on, you'll love it. I hated it. I couldn't. It was too visceral, too real. Like I had a really, really like strong reaction to like how uncomfortable it was. So I do wonder, it's interesting about what it might be triggering in people's brains and like adrenaline response.
I'll only say that I share your concern as a parent.
Yeah.
I mean, just from like a regulatory standpoint, I mean, how are...
That's where I was going to next. So I think obviously there's, everything that we're doing in the context of healthcare, to a certain extent, it is FDA regulated. We are actually pursuing FDA clearance for our therapeutics, right? There's several other companies in the VR, AR space or spatial computing space that have gotten FDA clearance for their therapeutics, right? For their ability to basically help and heal people, right? With a certain phobia or certain condition. There's also video games now that can help cure ADHD. There's a video game company called Keeley Therapeutics here in Boston, completely research-backed, by the way. You can go and read their research papers. It is proven to be just as effective, if not better, than pharma, kind of drugs, right? So I think there's definitely going to be a positive and a dark side to the advancements of this technology. The way I see it, it's a little bit like fire. You can cook with fire, you can burn with fire, and I think it really depends on where you are kind of the perspective that you're taking and where you're standing.
That was the quote of the night. Cook with fire, you can burn with fire. Love it. Yeah.
I actually come a little bit late, so I didn't listen to the first portion of the presentation or talk. The question I have is that for each of you, right now, in terms of the daily work you are doing, like what kind of AI tool that you find most useful or fascinating for you to use? Something I'd like to learn about.
I think it's a very good question. The question is, how are you using AI? What AI tools are you using in your day-to-day operations? I think one of the ways to get started into this field is by becoming a proficient user of all the tools that are out there. I use Claude, I use ChatGPT, I use Gemini. In the case of ChatGPT, I'm subscribed. I've generated virtual agents. I have like a CEO counselor agent. I have like an expert Swift programmer counselor, and I have a blog editorial counselor. And I feed them with enough context, and I use them to ping pong ideas, and that's on the like thinking and help me to think. But I also use Midjourney, and I use like the ChatGPT generation of images. So yeah, I think I find myself using Google less and less each day, and these tools more and more.
I need to get at Gabriel's level. Yeah, I personally am only using ChatGPT and then a little bit of Claude from Anthropic. To the question earlier about trust, I think that's another thing that we as consumers have to develop. So I have found personally, I don't want to read every single academic paper that someone sends me, but Claude is really good at summarizing them. So that's typically where I go for that. But for everything else, there's ChatGPT.
Yeah, I think there's lots of tools. There's actually a website, I believe it's called There is an AI for that. You can find all kinds of AI tools that you can use, but honestly, we use a lot, ChatGPT included, but one of my favorite ones is Otter AI. It actually summarizes meetings, so it joins a meeting as a virtual agent, and sometimes if I can't attend a particular meeting, and it can join, and it can summarize the entire notes for me. That to me has been the best use, for AI for me, because there's just tons of meetings, and I just want to sometimes have a nice little summary of everything. So.
Yeah, I'm seeing those on meetings more and more frequently now. It's pretty cool. I used ChatGPT a couple hours before I came over here because I was trying to come up with a good title for a talk on access to justice and AI, and we couldn't come up with one, so we asked AI to do it, or ChatGPT to do it. I think go ahead.
With that gentleman, what's your name?
I'm Gabriel.
Gabriel, yes. So thank you for sharing those information. Further one question that I have is that you say that you create those console to help you so I suppose during those console that you train, do you think that it kind of sustain all the information you fed to it? How long do you think that it will retain those memory of it?
The number of tokens that ChatGPT are able to retain that window is becoming larger and larger. But these assistants, which are a specific feature from ChatGPT, you're able to write the profile of this assistant and load 20 documents that may be up to half a gig in terms of size. Okay. So one goal I had was to load all the board of directors documents over the past 10 years, so that it has all the context in my company, and it helps me come to decisions with all the information about me, my company, and everything we've gone through. So that was an experiment. It's still ongoing. It's not there yet, but I think we'll have that.
Thank you.
Great. One quick question, then I think we got to wrap it up.
So this is for all three of you. It's more about challenges in the AI space regarding market entry and commercializing your idea.
I'll share my main mistake, which is thinking that because something has AI, it will have a great market fit. And these two things have nothing to do one with the other. And this is typical of engineers. You do something shiny with a very beautiful technology and a nice technical challenge, and you think the world will love it. And no one can care less if it was implemented one way or another, or if it has a rule or a machine learning model. So I think if you want to create a startup and a product, you should focus on the vision, on the business pain, and that side of the equation.
Yeah, and I'd add, foundation models are just so good at doing everything pretty well. It's very hard to have a moat in anything that we're doing now. So you really need to have some sort of special sauce, and it has to come from there first. If there's some proprietary data or just really deep industry expertise, these are the things that we really need to be focusing on before we decide to build with AI.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to add anything, more to that, but really, I go back to the basics. Start with the business problem that you're trying to solve, and then figure out where the technology can fit in. no, don't do it the other way around, because then you just, tech first, problem next, and that's how you see a lot of startups fail, basically. Yeah. Like, anybody know about the Humane AI pin company? Right? Like, you saw the mega flop that company was. They raised $240 million for a pin, an AI pin that can basically replace your phone. And
But they
just,
did raise the money.
yeah, again, they started out with the technology, they really didn't take into account what problem were they trying to solve, so.
Great, okay, so I think we are wrapping up. Handing it back to you.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you all for coming, tuning in, participating. Thank you to our wonderful panelists and moderators. Your conversation, your insights and feedback really helped to bring, at least for me, I know, a broader understanding of AI and